Welcome to a new episode of the Creative Industry Insight podcast. I'm your host, Bobby. For our first episode covering Black Mirror's USS Callister into Infinity, we welcome production designer Miranda Jones. Miranda will talk us through expanding and creating new worlds in the first Black Mirror sequel episode. Please be warned there are heavy spoilers in this episode. Now let's jump into the conversation with Miranda. Hi, Miranda. Thank you for joining me today.
Hello.
We're here to sit down and talk about one of the episodes of the latest series of Black Mirror, the USS Callister into Infinity, which is the first sequel of a Black Mirror episode, so that must be quite
It
exciting.
is. Yeah, it is. Yeah. Very glad they did one.
I would have thought they would have been more linking between the episodes because you got that sci-fi element. There's obviously sometimes stuff sprinkled in episodes for like Easter eggs for fans, but this is the first direct sequel. How did the project come about and what made you want to take it on?
So I believe originally they talked about doing a three-parter, but I think trying to, the actors in it now are stratospheric in their work. So I think trying to get them together. So then it became going to be one episode along with this season. I actually was working on another episode. I did the episode Bête Noire, and they it was Toby and Richard, the producer director, asked me to stay on and do this one, which was extremely flattering and exciting. So yes, I got it on the back of working with them on a different episode.
Again, one of those funny things, isn't it? If you're not there working on another episode, then you would never be sort of considered again. But then also, as you said, it's very flattering. Like
Yeah,
people know that you've done really well on one job, and it's like let's keep this collaboration going.
agreed. I think I do wonder if I was interviewing straight off for Callister. I don't have enough sci-fi in my background, perhaps, but they could see the potential. So yeah, right place, right time.
But with you mentioned about not having a sci-fi background because in my research, I was looking at your previous credits, and there's a lot of contemporary stuff. How do you go
Mm.
about tackling a genre that you haven't really worked in? And is it daunting, or is it a case that you don't need to think about it being daunting and you just need to sort of just jump in straight to the deep end?
Definitely jumping in, but I've I've not just done drama or TV even. I've done lots of events. I started out in a lot of light entertainment and music, videos, bands, TVs, and then did more drama. So I think you bring a working process to every job, not necessarily you've done it before. You bring a design process to that job. And if that's the mindset, then you find everything out you need to know. And sometimes I think coming into something that you've not necessarily done before, you might view it in a slightly different way. And that can be have its advantages. So I we just all jumped in. I mean, I did have some brilliant people on my team that had worked in sci-fi, and they were extremely helpful in contacts and processes. And, so as a team, we really pulled together on it to make it, yeah, those who didn't know as much about one thing would help those who did. And yeah, I
Mm.
would like to say though, I did have the shoulders to stand on of the guys who'd done the first step, Joel and Phil. So I had a leg up with what they'd already, created. So
I think that's another interesting point is that having a leg up because I was curious how. Oh, actually, I'll get back to the answer in a second, but I just want to sort of this was what you've mentioned now about the leg up because I can imagine as like a designer, it can be a little bit daunting to sort of do a sequel for an episode where you're kind of following on from another designer, was there any sort of concern that you're sort of just you might be copying and pasting what they did
Mm, mm,
previously,
mm.
but then also you might be losing your sense of identity and what you're designing?
When they first offered me the episode, my first reaction was, I can't do that. I can't just copy what's been done before. And I needed to put my own stamp on it. In some ways, it's harder to have something that you have to follow to a certain extent because some things tie you into something you might not want to do. So there are advantages and disadvantages. They're a talented pet and they've done a great job. And so taking the good. But sometimes when you get to re-look at something, you can make it, I don't want to say better because that sounds arrogant. It's not what I'm saying. You can make it, you know, I wanted to finesse this more and use the script to be the thing that upgraded it. So the ship, for example, my theory was that the ship had gone into infinity and had upgraded itself. So, it gave us time to do more with it. I mean, we built extra bits, the cabin and the lift and some extra corridors, but we were able to, have a lot more time to think about the detailing, and we put a lot more into it. And you could look at it, and inevitably, when you have more time, you can have another go at it. And the office was upgraded in Walton's ego. He'd Infinity had made a lot of money, and we got to really improve that office because it felt a little underwhelming last time, I thought, the Infinity office. So that one, there are some elements from the original, but I would hope even them. So I think it was an upgrade that allowed from the story because of Walton's ego. And then we obviously got to do a lot of new elements, which I think I would if I hadn't had them. So the planets and the fighter ships and, designing all the stuff in post-production. I had a lot of fun with the little fighting ships that Pixie and Mohawk and things are in, designing the real bit with carpenters, and then designing the not real bit with the computer guys. So the for example, the fighter ship, we designed it and it had its wings and we were doing it. And then when we found the planet that it needed to land on, in the clearing that it needed to land in, we knew it just couldn't have landed there. So one day I was watching something on dinosaurs and there was a pterodactyl landed on its elbows. And I thought, that's how our ship lands. It folds up and it lands on its elbows. And so the challenges inevitably come because it is a different script, but very much admired what the guys had done first.
You made a really good point about that in some areas you could be slightly restricted in what you could do, then other areas you can really build on what has been
Mm,
written and how you can portray what has sort of gone on. I think as well you need to probably create a sense of like time shift as well from what happened in the previous episode to the new one in the sort of real world.
very much.
Especially if we mentioned that the expansion of the office, but then also Watson's personal office where you can see that he's just knocked down that wall and it's just been like, yes, I've always wanted this.
Yeah.
Now I can have the size that I need, and then I can put the really unnecessary things in an office that certain people might have. And then I love the touches of just like all the pictures of him with the interviews and having this sort of
Yeah.
like big sofa that's like I always think like sometimes you're just asking for trouble when you have like sofas in your office because then it's like it welcomes people to stay when really it's like the total opposite with him.
Yeah. It's just all his ego. It was, and we wanted to play a lot with reflections in there. I mean, it's said, a lot in, we used it in TV to say lots of things, but all the just elements like on the glass doors and the glass walls, we'd used the pixelation from the game, from the logos to be the safety dots that you have to have on the glass. But it meant that when you had layers of it, you kind of pixelated the picture within the real world that's a bit like the game world. So we played with lots of things like that. And yeah, the picture with Walton with his head on his fingers, I think that was a Toby idea because then he found Walton sitting there in the exact same pose with his, and it was beautifully done. And we could, plan ahead and facilitate things like that.
I think as well, like because as like production designers, you are creators of this world. I feel as well like you can just start adding a lot of subtext into the story and add things in that where people are like, yeah, okay, I get it now. He is a sort of egomaniac, and
Yeah.
it's it's just all those little details that kind of get peppered in, and that's the sort of like
Yeah.
like chef's kiss and the sort of perfect touch to it all.
Yeah. And it's fun talking about these kind of things with Charlie ahead of time because it's really interesting living in his brain. And it's an enjoyable process to go through to add all these extra pieces. I mean, it originally the whole thing had been closer together, but because we wanted to do these upgrades, as they were called, we made the gap instead of weeks, he's been dead months. You know, that moment where and he says, but he's been dead months. That we did that so that we could facilitate this, change in the office and things like that to allow us to not do a mirror, not do exactly what had been done in the first one. It was very purposeful to allow us to improve not to allow us to move on time and the styling of things. So and then we got to build all the extra bits as well, like the planets and style all those that come in new each time from the first one. And I think we really had fun with those as well.
I think as well, like having those planets, because I can imagine in the scripts they're probably either nondescript or they're probably very descriptive about what they're going to be, and especially with like sci-fi where you can kind not necessarily have a lot more creative freedom, but I feel like you can kind of do more because it's not the real world, so you don't have to be faithful to what's being presented. But then you can have a
Yeah.
lot of fun with it because it's a game. It's like I can imagine
Yeah.
that difficult, but then also so much fun to let your creativity run wild.
Yeah, exactly that. We're somewhere between sci-fi, homage to sci-fi and the gaming world. And we planted ourselves somewhere between the two. When we were designing the planets, we actually went down some very potentially gaming routes, but then we decided that Daly was designing real worlds. They were more real than crazy. We pushed the colors and pushed things, but at one point we talked about really, really going mad with things, and we paired it back to to more homages to sci-fi that are out there. So, for example, the Green Planet where Pixie is was definitely an homage to Endor, Star Wars, and then our ice planet was always going to be an ice planet, but we couldn't find a location that was going to be practical and fantastical enough for us. We found something that was too normal, too boring. We're going to go to a slate quarry in Wales, but we couldn't get it quite right. So we ended up building that. So that opening ice planet is a build. And the copper planet, that's a copper mine in Wales, sorry, that orange planet. And then we pushed that turquoise into it with the blood from the animals that he eats. But at one time we were going to push a load of turquoise plants and things into it, and it got a little bit bonkers, and sort of distracted from the actual hilarity of that scene.
Again, probably a fine line between being sort of bonkers hilarity and sort of being grounded in material.
Yes,
Um,
yes.
but then that's still like a nice added touch, and being able to sort of play with colors on planets as well, because color palettes are very important for designers, and I think you can
Mm,
really play with how the real world is kind of just like I don't want to say mundane, but it's kind of has that silver sort of sheen on it. Everything kind of
mm.
looks quite similar, but then when they're outside on the game, everything's really quite bright, and even on a ship with the blues and the lights,
Yeah.
it just looks quite lush. So I guess it's like sometimes maybe they're the prison in the real world rather than in the game. So who
Yeah,
knows?
you're right. It is that sort of excitement in the game, although obviously they now have the Jeopardy, but yeah, the real world. But it's slightly less in this one, perhaps, than the last, in that they've both become could be quite a difficult place to be. But we definitely you needed to make the two places feel very different.
Yes, and again, it looks, and you guys managed to make it work, and it looks incredible. What I'm
Thank you.
al- what I'm also curious to know about, because you mentioned about talking with Charlie and working with him. But then also
Mm.
you do have a director, so you kind of have a lot of creative force behind it. Or how do you go about sort of navigating between working with a showrunner and a director so that you can kind of be faithful to both their visions?
I mean, it's interesting on this one because Toby's obviously quite a prevalent sci-fi director. He's got some real talent in that area, and so a lot to give. And Charlie has a very clear image about some things. He's got a clear image about the whole thing, but there are particular things that he has really, I mean, then the props and the graphics, and we would go into huge detail with Charlie about things like that. He's got a very strong opinion about certain elements, and he wants to know about everything. And fundamentally, Charlie is the driving force, but Toby has so much experience in this field. And I have to say, I mean, you'd start off with a tone meeting with Charlie to understand, not just understand what's written on the page, but how he sees things. And then we do a lot of sitting around in the room with Toby, the DOP, Stefan, who's amazing, and the producer, Richard. And we would sit and play with ideas. And Charlie wouldn't necessarily be in those very detailed meetings, but you have to go back to him with everything. And some things went through quite smoothly, and some things would not. He would be quite, even if we came up with something that was slightly different that wasn't working for him, generally would have to then rework it to make it work for us and him. But on the whole, it was very smooth, you know. Just a lot of talent in the room with those two.
I can't imagine what's going through sort of somebody like Charlie's mind when you've got so many different episodes. Some are like pretty much feature length, like this one,
Yeah, yeah,
and sort of spinning all those plates and making sure that
yeah.
everything is working at the same time.
Mm.
Um, yeah, amazing, really. But hats off to someone who's able to do that.
Living in Charlie's brain is a wonderful place to be. He will surprise you, and amazingly cheerful for some of the subject matter. It's quite optimistic as a person, really.
I think those are people that surprise you the most, where you think, wow, this is a really dark and dour, then they're probably just cracking jokes in the office constantly, and you're like,
Well, more, no, more. Do you know what? It's more that, I mean, he is funny, but it's more uh the way he comes at something is a surprise. And it is often funny, but it is surprising. And it's also very kind, um, about things and people and life. And so it's just a very pleasant experience to do it.
yeah, and imagine if it's the opposite, that it's very difficult to get things done, or even get out of
Yeah,
bed to go to the office every morning.
yeah. We've all been there though.
Yeah,
Some
no comment,
project.
no comment.
No.
I think we've only got a few minutes left, but what I would love to know about as well is like the collaborate is working on a show like this because it has that sci-fi element. What is it like when you're working with a VFX element in terms of how does that affect your designing? Because we'll see parts where the ship will be flying or be inside the deck, and you can see things happening through the windows.
Mm.
how do you incorporate those sort of story elements and VFX element into your designing?
I mean, we spend quite a lot of time working as a team. Us, special effects, visual effects, will all be. So it often starts off with mood boards. But for example, when we're seeing out the window and we arrive at the planet that we're shooting on, you all have to be absolutely sure, because when VFX create the arrival at that planet, if it's the green one that picks it up, it needs to feel that that's where you've arrived. So there's a lot of collaboration. Obviously, I work up some of these things with a concept artist. The concept artists for things like the ships and stuff then send those 3D models to visual effects, who then make them come alive we just send them rendered 3D and they make them come alive. But all the flying through all the nebulas and things, that's Josie and James's, the more broader things, they've created those out of thin air. And then they talk it a lot through with Toby, because of the movement through those things. It's less to do with me and much more to do with the director. And so I'm less involved with that sort of thing. But how that it then reacts into the set is because this time we put it all for real. It was all an LED screen. Before they've done it green, so the actors can really react to them. It's really going on there. Yeah.
And when you do see stuff like that on set, when you walk on and it's the day of the shoot, for example, or it's, I don't know, there's a pre-light. What is that like for your designer to sort of see your work and then seeing these LED screens projected? Because technology's caught up so much, but then also there's some people use it, some people don't. What is it like your experience seeing it?
You have to pinch yourself when you walk on set. It brings it to life. I mean, all the practical lighting around the ship this time was vast. The amount of real lights that the team put in for us, the practical sparks, all that coming to life, LEDs moving, doing things, never mind the screen and the images that it's creating. The whole environment is alive. And but then it's absolutely killed when you're looking out at just a green blob out the window. When you're looking out, it feels, well, I can't tell you. I mean, you have to pinch yourself. You can't quite believe it. It's amazing.
Yeah, I would love to know somebody from like, I don't know, 30 years ago who had started using green screen to now to see what's gone on, to be like,
Yeah.
holy
Yeah.
crap, like we've just really does feel like Black Mirror that we've sort of moved
Yeah.
on and now it's got this tech. Um,
Life imitating art. Yeah.
yeah, which is, I think that's a really good way of ending the episode. Um,
Good.
thank you so much, Miranda, for your time.
Thank you, Robbie.
USS Callister into Infinity is streaming now on Netflix. Go out and check out Miranda's work. And also, please don't forget to check out Miranda's work on other episode, Better Noir. Yes, thank you again, Miranda.
Thank you.
You take care and bye bye.
Bye, Robbie.
Thank you for listening. Please subscribe, rate, and review this podcast.